Namaskar. Today, the world is commemorating the International Day for Biological Diversity. On this day, that is 22nd May 1992, 116 countries from across the world signed the text of the Convention on Biological Diversity at Nairobi in Kenya. As per this text, the parties to this convention desired to recognize the sovereign rights of the countries over their biological resources and associated knowledge, as well as to take effective measures in their countries to conserve our biodiversity. So, this year there won't be much celebration on account of the COVID pandemic, but definitely it assumes a lot of significance in the present scenario, and it sends a larger message to humanity as a whole to respect nature and allow every organism to live in its own domain. So, what is biodiversity? Biodiversity is nothing but all the life forms you see on earth, the plants, trees, wildlife, animals, fishes, birds, insects, microorganisms, and so on. It is actually the variety and variability of all life forms on earth. For example, mango, as you know, is a species in the plant kingdom. But today we have about 5,000 varieties of mango. That is because of the genetic variability available in a particular species. So for humanity, it is very, very important to not only preserve a particular species, but also preserve the genetic variations available in a particular species. So why is it important to conserve our biodiversity? The first and foremost reason is the fact that every organism in this world is dependent on another organism for its living. For example, we depend on plants for our living. Plants directly depend on microorganisms in the soil for their living. Plants also depend on birds for dispersal of seeds. Again, plants depend on honeybees for pollination. Birds directly depend on insects for their living, and insects live on grasses. So there is a very complicated food chain, and it is so complicated it forms a web. And if we try to lose one species, in that process, a number of other species also gets lost from our biodiversity. And scientists have estimated that every loss of a bird results in at least 90 species of insects and 70 species of plants getting extinct from Mother Earth. Such is the intricate web of life. So it is in our own interest that we protect our biodiversity. The second and important reason for preserving our biodiversity is the rich genetic variations, valuable genes available in the forest ecosystem, particularly in the tropical and temperate forests. A large number of wild species carrying valuable genes are still available in forest system. And it is in our own interest to protect these wild forms. After all, forest is the mother of modern day agriculture because most of the cultivated crops today were once upon a time wild species occurring in forests and were domesticated during a period of time. And as the population keeps increasing, it is in the interest of humanity to preserve these wild varieties because we don't know in which form a valuable gene is available in the forest ecosystem. Take, for example, India. Today, the population is about 1.2 billion, and it is very likely to touch about 1.5 billion by 2050. In order to feed this growing population, it is very, very important to preserve our genetic variability so that more and more transgenic crops can be produced through genetic engineering methods by transferring a lot of productive genes, disease resistant genes, insect resistance genes from wild forms to the cultivated crops, which can increase the production and productivity of the agriculture sector. The third important reason why we should preserve our biodiversity is in terms of the forest ecosystem. Forest provides a lot of ecosystem services, and it is practically difficult to estimate the value of ecosystem services which a forest ecosystem provides, whether it is oxygen or air or the valuable genetic diversity. And once a forest ecosystem gets destroyed, a series of global problems arise. Today's problems like the global warming, climate change, ozone depletion, desertification of productive areas, these are all the result of deforestation that is happening in different parts of the world. This must stop. Otherwise, we are going to face a lot of climatic changes. The fourth important reason why we should conserve our biodiversity is the fact that a lot of traditional knowledge associated with biological resources are available in the rural communities and communities which are living inside forests. These traditional knowledge have been preserved over a long time, maybe centuries. Suddenly, some commercial entity enters a rural community and, without adequately compensating these communities, takes away such traditional knowledge and starts commercially exploiting them is a cause of concern for us. We have to compensate these people who have been preserving this traditional knowledge because for lot of health problems still there is no solution, but such solutions are available in this traditional knowledge, and this knowledge has to be preserved. The fifth reason why we should conserve biodiversity is the ethical and moral right of humanity. We claim to be the highest or the most intelligent creature in the biodiversity ecosystem, but unfortunately, because of our greed, we are least bothered about the lives of other organisms and we keep encroaching into the domain of other organisms. Evolution is a natural process. Evolution is a time tested process because that gives rise to advanced forms of life. And in that process, some species get extinct. But take the case of the Indian cheetah or the Mauritius dodo. These organisms became extinct not because of an evolutionary process, but because they were all hunted to death. And man ensured that these species become extinct from the ecosystem. Now, coming to the causes of biodiversity loss. The first and foremost cause of biodiversity loss is the illegal trade in wild plants and wild animals that is happening in different parts of the world. And there is a lot of demand for wildlife products. which is in fact encouraging poaching of wildlife in forest areas. This is a very serious cause of concern. The second important reason for biodiversity laws is the implementation of insensitive development projects that is happening in different parts of the world, where without taking into account the endemism or the biodiversity richness, development projects are being implemented, and in that process, a lot of biodiversity in forested areas or ecologically sensitive areas get destroyed. The third important reason for biodiversity laws is the growing population, which puts a lot of pressure on the forest ecosystem or the agriculture ecosystem. And there is a tendency to produce more. And in that process, a lot of organisms get destroyed. Poverty is, of course, another reason, because people who are living in rural communities, areas close to the forest ecosystem, are generally poor, and for their own livelihood, they use the forest ecosystem, which also causes loss of biodiversity. Now, coming to the strategies that can be adopted for biodiversity conservation. It all depends on for what purpose you want to conserve biodiversity. Different countries have adopted different strategies. Generally, in order to conserve biodiversity, an in situ approach is normally adopted, where the organisms are allowed to live in their own domain without much human interference. Examples of national forests, national parks, or wildlife sanctuaries that are being declared by different governments help organisms to survive in their own habitats. But there is also a in situ approach where we try to preserve valuable genetic material from becoming extinct. Classic examples would be the seed banks, the gene banks, the aquariums, zoos, and so on. So, with the modern technology available in remote sensing, GIS, genetic engineering, biotechnology, it is our duty to protect our biological resources available in the natural habitats, as well as which are protected by humans in different labs and aquariums and zoos. But above all, people should be sensitized on the need to conserve biodiversity, particularly at the policy making level, the bureaucrats, the student communities, general public, the companies, researchers, scientists, and above all, the farmers. These people have to be sensitized on the need to conserve our biodiversity. I will just tell how agriculture ecosystem gets affected by the farming community in many parts of the world. Farmers generally think that if I apply more fertilizer in my farmland, the production of my crop will increase. It is actually a myth. This myth was actually solved recently when the central government implemented the Central Soil Health Card scheme across India, where farmers were given a soil health card indicating the nutrient status available in their farmland. And I was the soil conservation director in Kerala, and we did a lot of field trials, and across different crops and different regions, we found that there is a increase of production by about 10% and decrease in the cost of cultivation by about 30% if farmers adopt an optimum application of manures rather than over application of manures. Because over applying manures in fact affects the farm ecosystem. Lot of beneficial microorganisms are available in soil which farmers are not aware. These microorganisms help the crops. For example, phosphorus is very essential element for crop, but it is always available in an insoluble form. And unless a phosphate solubilizing bacteria is put into action in the soil ecosystem, plants will not be able to absorb the phosphorus in the soil. Similarly, there is a fungi called vesicular arbuscular mycorrhiza. This is the only microorganism available on earth which is capable of actually dissolving the water molecule around every soil particle and transferring the same to a plant root. So even if the uh, agriculture ecosystem is facing a drought type of situation, still if the soil ecosystem has a mycorrhiza, plants are assured of water because on the face of it you may feel that the area is a drought affected area. But actually, if the organism is available in farmland, it will ensure that the water molecule around every soil particle, which is otherwise the plant root is not able to suck that particular water molecule, but only this microorganism has the capacity to take that water molecule from a soil particle and take it to the roots of the soil ecosystem. So therefore, farmers will have to be made aware. Not only farmers, other sections of the society have to be made aware about the importance of biodiversity in different ecosystems. Now, coming to the legal framework on how we are going ahead. Fortunately, the constitution makers have given a lot of thrust to environment protection. Article 48A and 51A of the constitution ensures that there is a it is a duty of every citizen, fundamental duty of every citizen, to protect our environment, our forest ecosystem, the wildlife, lakes, rivers, and so on. Similarly, the constitution also mandates the government of India and the state governments to take adequate action to protect the environment of this country. And based on this constitutional obligation, government of India as well as different state governments have enacted their own laws. The Indian Forest Act, the Wildlife Conservation Act, the Environment Protection Act, Forest Conservation Act are some of the key legislations which have tried to conserve our biodiversity in India. Whatever components were left out of the earlier legislations were adequately captured in the Biological Diversity Act, which was enacted by the Union government in 2002. This was as per the obligation and India's commitment to the Convention on Biological Diversity that every state will enact laws to protect its biodiversity. Accordingly, today, India has this Biological Diversity Act 2002, and there is a three-tier institutional mechanism which actually implements the provisions of this law. At the national level, we have the National Biodiversity Authority. At the state level, we have the State Biodiversity Board. At the union territory level, we have the union territory councils. And at the local body level, whether it is panchayat or a gram panchayat or a block panchayat or a district panchayat, we have a biodiversity management committee. And every local body is expected to prepare a people's biodiversity register and document all the biological resources available in a particular local body. Today, there are about 260,000 biodiversity management committees functioning in India. And every state has a state biodiversity board, and the National Biodiversity Authority is functioning in Chennai. It is very, very important to regulate the use of biological resources and traditional knowledge so that the people who are conserving this are adequately compensated. Not only that, the biological resources which are being extracted are made available on a sustainable basis for the same industry so that the industry also benefits and the community also benefits. It should be a win-win situation. And that is why the National Biodiversity Authority and the state biodiversity boards and the biodiversity management committees have been trying to regulate the access and benefit sharing mechanism in India. And if any individual or entity who wants to access a biological resource, they will have to take the approval of the NBA or the state biodiversity board before accessing any biological resource for any commercial purpose. And today, we have been able to ensure that India is one of the topmost countries which have implemented this ABS mechanism as per the decision of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And as we commemorate this International Day for Biological Diversity, every Indian should be proud that India is a mega diverse country. Out of the 34 hotspots available in the world, India has 4 hotspots. By hotspots, we mean the richness in endemism and the richness in biodiversity available in a particular country and in a particular region. So, we are really lucky to have these hotspots in our country. And I am sure that with the cooperation of all sectors of our population, we will be able to protect our biodiversity and send a message on the need to conserve them. And today, as we face a pandemic, it is an opportune time to realize the importance of biodiversity. Unless we give space to every organism to live in its own habitat, it is going to come back to us in a more lethal form. You encroach forest land, you are going to get man-animal conflict. That is going to cause a lot of loss to life and property, including agriculture loss. If you go into the wildlife ecosystem and enter their domain, start eating wildlife, it's going to come back lethally on you, because we know that every organism in this world has to thrive with a particular microbial load. It may be virus or a bacteria or a fungi. That includes man as well. Every system, biological system, has a microbial load. And when we go closer to a wildlife, there is a possibility that some microorganisms may get transferred to man until it adjusts itself into the new human ecosystem. There could be loss of lives, and that is what we are seeing in the form of the COVID pandemic. And this is an opportune movement for every one of us to realize the importance of biodiversity, the need to protect biodiversity, need to give space to every organism to live happily, so that everyone, including man, can live happily on Mother Earth. Thank you. Jai Hind.